Okay, well, let's get started. It's a few minutes after 10. I think we might have a few more folks joining us, but we'll start with some of the introductory comments. My name is Hadley Rodero. I'm Deputy Director of Planning, Customer and Government Relations at Washington State Ferries. Welcome to the first TAG meeting in a very long time. Thank you for being here and for your patience with us over the last year while we worked on developing the range of alternatives for the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal project. We're excited to share the work the team's been doing for the last year and to hear your input on the alternatives and the screening criteria, which will be the focus of today's meeting. We may have members of the public joining us as members of the audience. I don't see any. I do see one right now, and they may join us throughout the meeting, so just be aware of that. During this meeting, we'll have time between each presentation to take your comments and questions. We'll pause at several points during the meeting, so wait for that. And I'm going to now just turn it over to Laura, the meeting facilitator. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Hadley, and welcome everyone. My name is Laura Lebissiner-Miller. I will be your facilitator today, and we're really excited to have you all for our technical advisory group meeting. Before we start, I want to welcome, we have one community member in attendance today. You will be in listen-only mode and you won't have access to submit comments in the chat box. We will have a few minutes at the end of the meeting if you'd like to provide any questions or comments after our presentation. We also encourage you to email your comments to the project team, and Haley will drop that email address that's on the screen there into the chat. As a reminder, we are recording this meeting and we'll be posting the video on the project website for anyone who couldn't attend live. We have several new TAG members, so we would just like to start with a quick round of introductions. I'm going to start with our Washington State Ferries project team, and then invite each of you TAG members to introduce yourselves and just the name of the agency that you represent. So I'm going to start with Ed Thomas.
Hello, good morning. I'm Ed Thomas. I'm the engineering lead for the project team responsible for the team's development of these alternatives.
Thanks, Ed. Marcia?
Hello, good morning. I'm Marcia Tolan, the environmental lead with WSF for this project.
Thank you, Marcia. Trevor?
I'm Trevor Sharp. I represent operations.
Thanks, Trevor. James?
Good morning. James Gregory with Jacobs Engineering. I am the environmental lead for the consultant team.
Thanks, James. Sasha?
Good morning, Sasha Visconti with Confluence Environmental, and I'm supporting the ecosystem side of the project.
Thanks, Sasha. Haley?
Sorry about that. Hello, everyone. My name is Haley Nolan, and I support communications and community engagement for the project.
Thanks, Haley. Sophie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sophie, and I'm supporting communications for the project as well.
Thank you, Sophie. And now our technical advisory group members, starting with Aaron.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Aaron Halbert with the Transportation Commission, and my role with them is financial analyst.
Aaron. Adam.
Hello, my name is Adam Osbikoff. I work for the Snoqualmie Indian Tribe. Thank you.
Adam. Amanda.
Hey, good morning. Amanda Thayer from Seattle Department of Transportation. I am in the Interagency Programs Group.
Thanks, Amanda. Chapin?
Hello, everyone. Chapin Peer. I'm with Seattle Public Utilities. I'm filling in for Shannon Kelleher today. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chris? Chris Arkels?
Chris Arkels, representing the King County Executive's Office in King County Metro.
Thanks, Chris. Chris Mack.
Hi, I'm Chris Mack. I represent King County Wastewater Treatment Division.
Thank you. David?
Good morning, David Fort, Kitsap County Public Works.
David and Jacob.
Hi, Jacob Brett. I'm with King County Metro Service Development.
Thanks, Jacob. Laura.
Morning, Laura Arbor, State Fish and Wildlife.
Thanks, Laura. Lindsay.
Good morning, Lindsay Handel with Federal Highway Administration. I'm the Senior Area Engineer.
Thanks, Lindsay. Mark.
Mark Lampard, King County Wastewater Treatment Division.
Thanks, Mark. Penny.
Penny Kelly with Department of Ecology, the 401 project manager for this project. So
Thanks, Penny. And finally, Scott.
Yeah, Scott Vandenberg with King County Wastewater as well.
Great, thank you. I tried to go in alphabetical order, but if I missed anyone, please please chime in now and introduce yourself. Okay, I think we can move on to our agenda. So just a quick overview of today's agenda. We plan to recap where we have been in this process. I know it's been about a year since we last met, so we have a lot to share with you today about an update on our planning process, as well as refined terminal alternatives. And we have some time for discussion throughout the meeting, as well as towards the end of the meeting. So with that, Hadley is going to recap where we are in this process.
Thanks, Laura. So just as a refresher, and for those of you who are new to the group, we know it's been a long time since we last met. We're in the midst of a planning and environmental linkages study that Marcia's going to discuss a little bit more in a few minutes. And we've been working for several years to narrow the range of alternatives for how to replace the Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal. We started with kind of the sky's the limit. Every alternative, every idea was considered during level 1 screening. And at that time, we screened out locations that would have been other than the current location of the Fauntleroy Terminal. And then we moved on to level 2 screening and took a little bit of a closer look at a range of alternatives at the current location and screened out alternatives that would have had an impact on local streets and transit connections and other criteria during level 2 screening. That's the last time we met. We discussed the results of that screening. And we, at that time, identified 2 very general alternatives to carry forward to the next level of screening. So that's where we are today, as this graphic depicts. We've had those 2 general alternatives that the team has been working on refining into several more detailed project alternatives for the next round of level 3 screening. So let's just recap. The next slide shows where we were at level 1 and level 2 based on input from our community. We've had over nearly, I guess at this point, 800 comments in the last 2 years from members of the community about the project, other advisory group comments. We screened out alternatives that would move the terminal to Elliott Bay, Burien, Des Moines, all the other ideas that were brought forward during level 1. We also screened out alternatives in the Fauntleroy area that included remote holding, major impacts to Lincoln Park and other parks, or that required configuring local streets. And a lot of that was based on feedback from this group about impacts that would have on the broader neighborhood and on transit and other considerations. So that brought us to the end of level 2 screening. We released the level 2 screening report a little over a year ago that identified 2 general alternatives: replacing the dock at the same location at roughly the same size as it is today, which holds just over 80 vehicles. The rest of the vehicles are accommodated in shoulder holding along Fauntleroy Way Southwest for a total of 186 vehicles. We also discussed at that time looking at strategies such as good to go or advanced ticketing policies and other operational improvements to make the terminal and especially a dock of that size work better and operate better. And then the second alternative that we agreed to carry forward is a expanded dock that would hold 124 to 186 vehicles. But we also said at that time, based on overwhelming comments from the community, that any alternative would avoid or minimize permanent impacts to Cove Park adjacent to the terminal and the nearshore habitat. So those were the two very general alternative descriptions that we had about a year ago. And since then, we've been working to refine those two alternatives, and that's what we're going to discuss today. But for more of the process and where we're at, Marcia is going to talk about our timeline.
Thanks, Hadley. So we genuinely appreciate your patience this past year as we've been navigating planning and environmental leakages process and work to refine the alternatives. As you know, PEL is a planning process that involves collaborating with the community and our partners early in the project planning. We are starting the level 3 screening process where we will consider things like traffic conditions, cost estimates, permitting requirements, and ways to make the terminal work safer and more efficiently for everyone. We'll also study good to go and advanced ticketing. All of this work will help us identify a preferred alternative for further NEPA environmental review, where we will evaluate the project and potential impacts on the built and natural environment. We're working on an updated project schedule and plan to begin design and construction by 2027. So please note that there is some overlap between the project phases, and we'll work to refine and share any updates that this work involves. This is a multi-year process and will include multiple opportunities for input from our advisory groups such as you and the broader community. So this image shows key features near the terminal that we've considered as we've been developing our all of the alternatives and the features that we'll consider as we screen the alternatives. One of the complexities, as you may realize, is the project is very constrained. It's a very constrained site. So as you can see in this image, King County's Rapid Ride bus station is on Fauntleroy Way to the south and provides connection to and from the terminal. And then to the north, the terminal is bordered by the King County Barton Street pump station. And then again on the south is the SPU property and a parking lot owned by the city of Seattle. Out into at the end of the trestle to the west is the intertidal and nearshore habitats, which includes eelgrass and macroalgae, which is shown by that darker green configuration in the water. Near it offers habitat for salmon and other wildlife, but in a recent underwater video survey, we confirmed that there's no eelgrass in the area around the end of the dock where you see propeller wash that has formed a scour hole because it's preventing the macroalgae growth. You can see Fauntleroy Creek angling in from the east, which exits a culvert under Fauntleroy Way southwest and then flows south of the dock and currently angles under the dock to the north and then into Puget Sound. Fauntleroy Creek provides some spawning habitat and for salmon and trout. And then the aging dock is supported by creosote treated timber piles and contains, together with the superstructure there, more than 1,000 tons of toxic creosote treated timber. And the number of pilings is quite dense that's supporting the trestle, and the density of those piles changes the flow of the creek, causing debris to snag and driftwood to collect under the trestle and then on the shore, as some of it you can see to the south of the trestle. This makes it difficult for fish to pass to and from Fauntleroy Creek. And just to the north of the trestle on land is Cove Park, which offers public waterfront access. It's a narrow sandy beach next to the dock. And then to the east of the intersection, Fauntleroy Way southwest and the terminal is Captain's park. It's a public open green space that has a bench for seating. So I'm gonna pass on to Ed Thomas, who will continue to talk to you about design concepts.
Hey, thank you, Marcia. So before we present the alternatives, I'd like to identify several key features that are consistent across all alternatives. All replace the dock at the same location. All accommodate 186 vehicles holding as accommodation between dock holding and Fauntleroy Way Southwest holding in the queue lane. All meet seismic design standards and will accommodate projected sea level rise. All have space for large trucks to safely navigate across the dock. All have wider lanes and space for people walking, rolling, biking, and driving motorcycles. All have more space for operational needs on the dock. All have a new terminal building to accommodate operational space and the projected pedestrian ridership. All have a dedicated drop-off and pickup area for passengers with disabilities. All have a slightly larger toll plaza area with maintaining 2 new toll booths, but they will be to current standards. They are a little bit wider, and the actual toll lanes will be a little bit wider to meet standards. Also, all have minimal dock widening in the nearshore area. So as Marcia mentioned, in addition to these features, we are also studying good to go and advanced ticketing options, as well as other features like overhead passenger loading, and working with our SDOT partners to consider changes to the intersection. And we'll share more of these features at our next meeting. So now we're going to present a series of oblique graphics of the alternatives. And as we run through these perspective views, we're going to go quickly at first so you can see the differences, and then we'll come back and talk about a little bit more detail of each alternative. And as we're scrolling through these, I'd like to note the shaded area, the dark shaded area on either side of the dock that Marcia had pointed out is representative of the eelgrass and macroalgae area. Haley, could we run through those just one more time? Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to provide a brief description of each of the alternatives, after which we're going to pause for a Q&A session. So the first option here, alternative A, replaces the dock at the same size as the current dock and maintains the existing wing walls and dolphins, which are the in-water structures that help guide the ferry into place and protect the transfer span and the dock. This alternative has 4 holding lanes and holds 76 vehicles on the dock, which is 8 fewer cars than the existing. This concept is slightly wider than the current dock to provide space for a large vehicle to safely navigate across the dock and to provide dedicated space for pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists, and vehicles. The next alternative, alternative A1, is the same width as alternative A, but is slightly longer than the existing dock and includes new dolphins and wing walls. This option also has 4 holding lanes and holds the same amount of vehicles as the current dock, which is 84 vehicles. Alternatives A2 and A3 are variations of A1 that have the same layout as A1, but A2 would include good to go and A3 would include advanced ticketing technologies. Alternative B is the same width as alternative A, but is a longer dock moving the ferry slip, which is the transfer span, wing walls, and dolphins into deeper water. This option has 4 holding lanes and holds 124 vehicles on the dock, which is 1 full Issaquah class ferry. Lengthening the dock and moving the ferry slip to deeper water may allow eelgrass and macroalgae to regrow in and around the scour hole, which would be the same for all of the lengthened dock alternatives. Alternative B1, again, is the same length as alternative B. It includes one extra holding lane on the north side of the dock over deeper water. And the near shore widening is minimized to minimize impacts to Cove Park and environmentally sensitive areas that are closer to shore. With the added holding lane, this alternative holds 155 vehicles on the dock. So next, alternative B2 is similar to alternative B, has 4 holding lanes and adds 2 shorter holding lanes to the south of the dock for priority vehicles. This tapered dock design is narrower near the shoreline, again, to minimize impacts to near shore. This concept holds 155 vehicles on the dock. And then B3 alternative is similar to and slightly shorter than alternative B2 and includes 1 less full-length holding lane. The rest of the design features are the same as alternative B2, and this concept holds 124 vehicles on the dock. So to summarize, we have 4 B alternatives, 2 of which hold 124 vehicles on the dock and 2 hold 155 vehicles on the dock. And they're all variations of a longer dock alternative. Then the last alternative, alternative C, is a longer dock alternative, and it's similar to alternative B2 in its layout, but adds a full-length holding lane on the north side of the dock. The dock is still narrower near the shoreline to minimize the nearshore impacts, and the rest of the design features are the same as alternative B2, including 2 shorter holding lanes for priority vehicles on the south side. This option can hold 186 vehicles on the dock, removing the queue on Fauntleroy Way Southwest on most typical days. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Laura to facilitate Q&A.
Thank you, Ed. It's a lot of alternatives, and we do want to pause now to see if you have any clarifying questions about the differences between the alternatives or any feedback on the range of alternatives that Ed has shared with us.
And Laura, I see that Dave Sowers, our Director of Terminal Engineering, was able to join us, so Dave can answer questions as well, just so everyone knows he's here.
Sadly, Laura.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for that presentation and great illustrations of the different options. I was wondering back to when Marcia was talking about the eelgrass and the macroalgae, there was mention that kelp was most prevalent to the west. And I was wondering where to the west.
Thank you for that question, Laura and Marcia. We've got that slide up here, and Haley can probably use the cursor there if you'd like to speak to that.
It may have just been the way I worded it, I was generally making a remark that from the west of wherever I had been pointing out that the green area generally shows where the underwater video survey expressed that macroalgae and eelgrass grow. I didn't mean to confuse you by my explanation. We also do have Sasha Visconti here online with us too, if you want more detailed information about that video survey.
Yeah, if Sasha wants to speak to it, that would be great.
Hello.
Thank you, Sasha.
We did, this was a video survey. It was a reconnaissance level survey. So we didn't differentiate tremendously amongst the laminaria and kelp out here. There's no canopy covering kelp species. A lot of it's floating macroalgae. And it really is interspersed with where you're seeing the eelgrass area, and then somewhat offshore of the slip to the north and to the south. Nothing really in the slip, as you might imagine. But it's sort of following the lines of the eelgrass beds. We have a report with some graphics that are in review right now, and those should be available probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I think. Once we get
So did you not see any bulk kelp then?
No.
Okay.
At least not from the video survey. I mean, as you know, we'll do a more comprehensive dive survey when we get a little bit more refinement. This would be a big area to do a dive survey right now with all these alternatives, but when things narrow down, we can get a closer look. But so Chris Chiesla from my office was out there, and he said that he didn't see any sort of canopy covered, kelp beds or extensive kelp areas there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha and Marcia. It sounds like that's some information we can share out once it's available.
Yep, I think we're just in final review, so I'm thinking it won't be too long.
Sounds good. Marcia, we also have a question here from Chris in the chat. If we know the total overwater coverage for each of the alternatives, do you want to speak to that one?
We do roughly know some of the overwater coverage, and but we've left. I don't believe that we've put that on the plan view level of the different alternatives, but we do know that information, and I don't have it at the top of my head or at my fingertips to share with you, but we do have a rough idea of that differentiation between each alternative.
And it's in the memo that we sent you all on Monday. I'm just looking for the page number. There's a table that shows the amount of overwater coverage for each alternative.
Yes, I was doing the same. And Haley, you probably have that document open.
Sorry, my computer's choosing now to freeze, but I'll put that in the chat, Chris, the page number of the document. Is there anyone here who did not receive the alternative summary PDF document that we sent out on Monday?
It's page number 10.
Thanks, Marcia.
In the document.
Yeah.
Did everyone receive that document? Because it has much more detail about the alternatives that Ed just described. Good. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments on the alternatives that Ed walked through? We will have some additional time after Marcia speaks with us about the screening criteria as well. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on. We can always revisit these slides if you think of another question or comment. Marcia, would you like to walk us through the screening criteria? And Haley will pull that up on the screen as well.
Okay, thanks, Shirley, Laura. So if you've got your screening memo, the draft screening memo that was sent to you, it's on the table begins on page 27. So it may be a little bit difficult to see virtually here, but if you have that memo up, you can enlarge it to the size that you need. So as we move closer to selecting a preferred alternative, we'll be conducting the level 3 screening similar to how we did the level 2 screening. We've refined the screening criteria that we used in level 1 and level 2. So the first column on your left shows the criteria that we used during level 1, which is consistent, as I just said, between levels 1 and 2. You can see like the accommodating projected sea level rise is a consistent one throughout, improving operational efficiency. There are others that she's scrolling down that you can see or may see within the document that you're familiar with from the previous screenings. And then the central column, the second one, it has performance metrics that we're using to screen in level 3, which were developed out of each of the criteria. And then the third column shows how we plan to screen the alternatives using a yes or no or high, medium, and low. So as you can see, that screening at this phase is a little bit more detailed than we've had for the levels 1 and level 2, and it's using these specific metrics. It's at a draft state, and we are hoping to get any feedback you have on the metrics and on the approach to yes, no, high, medium, and low. Laura, I'll bring it back to you for more discussion.
Thank you, Marcia. So as Marcia just highlighted, these are draft criteria, and we are looking for your input today or following the meeting today. So with that, we'll just open it up if you have any initial reactions to what Marcia has shared. Chris, I see your hand is up.
I'm just trying to be helpful and speak up first. I am concerned about the overall over the water coverage. I want to understand the trade-off between parking more cars on a dock over the water versus parking cars on Fauntleroy. Environmentally, I'd like to understand that trade-off more. All the talk about scour holes and eelgrass is new from when we revisited this a month ago. It seems to make intuitive sense to me to build a longer dock to get the scour hole and the boat into deeper water. However, I am concerned about wider docks. Personally, my own gut tells me I'd rather see more cars on the land environmentally than over the water environmentally. So just a few thoughts on my part.
Thanks, Chris. Great questions there. Marcia, do you want to speak to those environmental trade-offs?
Sure, and others from the team can join in to add more content. We are balancing some of the feedback we've gotten from the community and other advisory groups, because this is, even though this project is happening at Fauntleroy, it's representative of a regional solution for the triangle route, which calls for us to look at how to reduce traffic congestion along Fauntleroy Way, and where overall all of the alternatives, as Ed mentioned, have the same criteria where they're managing for 186 vehicles in total, and all the alternatives represent a mixture of whether they are over water or a percentage over of that 186 over water and a percentage on the Fauntleroy Way. And by processing more vehicles that have already, when vehicles have passed through the toll booth and they're waiting in the holding lanes on the trestle, that promotes efficiency. And when we get to the number of one boatload, which is 124 vehicles, that efficiency marks sort of an even point, being able to keep to our schedule, and because they've already gone through all the processing in the toll booth. So we're looking at those trade-offs by how much is brought over water on the trestle and how much it remains within the holding lanes. We might want to have Ed come on to speak to, or David if he's available, just to talk some from the engineering perspective too about the size trade-off in terms of operations.
Yeah, I'll just add, Chris, I think it's a good comment. I think, like a lot of things, there's always trade-offs between expanding the dock over the water and keeping a smaller dock and operating most of the cars off of shore. I think maybe one of the areas you're going with is having more vehicles over the water creates environmental issues with maybe stormwater collection and the fact that you have cars on the dock. There will be, as part of this project, a stormwater collection and treatment system that likely doesn't exist up on Fauntleroy Way, where typically those storm drains collect water and just send it right out to Puget Sound. So there will be that element that's part of the future project. But yeah, I think that what we're trying to obviously look closely at is how we can balance all these various trade-offs, and this screening criteria will help us do that and look at those things that have either have a low impact or have a high impact and weigh them against one another. Thanks.
I'd like to add that we are performing a traffic analysis study, comparing the various load unload procedures for a couple of sailings, comparing the results of that to each of the trestle size alternatives to see where we can come up with that efficiency point that Marcia referenced. And then we can evaluate that based on Q impacts.
Excited. I believe that will be content that'll be ready for one of our next meetings. But thank you for that comment question, Chris. I see in the chat you also have a comment here just expressing favor of good to go and technological solutions, given that many of the riders are regular ferry riders. Thank you for that comment as well. Penny, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just let me lower the hand because I always forget. I also just wondered if and I assume this would be so, but just from the graphics, which by the way, those were really great, very helpful. And I'll just be honest and say, no, I did not get to that memo, but I did get it. And just wondering though, if I agree with Chris, and probably some other folks too are thinking this, which is the longer options are more favorable to get away from the eelgrass. And it's very, something I would like to think would happen is, yes, the eelgrass would start to, recolonize that scour hole, which I assume also means that it has to start filling in. So two things that I was wondering about that was, do any of the wider options that hold more cars, because I was also thinking about that stormwater thing. So that answered my question there. So in some ways, yeah, I'd like to see that the cars getting off the road and getting into a place where stormwater would be better treated. That to me is something that I think is an important thing to consider for the inputs into that area. But then would you be like kind of evaluating if a larger area is also going to shade out some eelgrass area? It was really hard for me to see that from the graphics. So I assume that would be something that would be looked at. And then would Washington State Ferries also say though, hey, by extending the dock, we think the scour hole will fill in? And would you want to like throw that out there as something that's like sort of compensates for the wider dock, shading out some of the eelgrass? And then would you also monitor it? So those were some things that I was just thinking in terms of questions and conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I heard several questions in there related to the scour hole, and then also about stormwater. Marcia, do you want to tackle those?
Sure. And I know we're looking at the table here, but if it's possible to go back to that the slides and show that where it has the bathymetry on it. Generally, where you see the scour hole, and then the bathymetry kind of shows it too. The signature shows that once we get to that point, once you get to that point where the scour hole is, and then where the navigation aids are at the end of the transfer span, the depth dramatically begins to deepen in the water there. And so when the alternatives that lengthen the dock push them out beyond those where the dolphins are today, that scour hole can fill. The hope is that the scour hole will heal itself, and macroalgae and eelgrass can then begin to populate that area, and those things are bringing everything farther away from the nearshore environment is a benefit. And even though it's not clearly shown on this plan view, all of the options have the the trestle raised about 4 feet to withstand sea level rise. And then there are fewer pilings that would be supporting that trestle than today. So there's more light going in. There's less opportunity for debris to snag and pile up along the breach, but also it will help change with the prop wash being farther out in the prop wash on vessels occurring farther out into deeper water. The signature of sand movement or transport along the shoreline there will change as well. And so perhaps you might see more eelgrass coming closer to the shoreline than today.
Okay. Thank you, Marcia. I was just wondering if then you would Washington State Ferries be monitoring that at all?
I think we would, similar to the way that's set up with the Muckleteel project, where there was a scour hole left from the former terminal, and when we do our annual bathymetric surveys, that's included, and we've been watching that heal.
Okay. Thank you.
I would also like to add that the structures team will be considering some light transmission possibility along the edges of the terminal through the superstructure. And I think there's been evidence of installations like that in a couple of different terminals within WSF. But that's some potential to add a little bit of light within the shading of the terminal boundary within a few feet.
Thank you, Ed, and thanks, Marcia. Laura, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to go back to what Ed was just saying a moment ago when he suggested there might be an opportunity to add some light transmission. And I think you mentioned around about a border or a boundary or whatever. I wonder then if that's something that would be, I mean, just from the way the sun is in this area and this being an east-west dock, if that would be something that would be able to be added to the south side of the structure where you're going to get the greatest benefit from any sort of additional light that could potentially go through versus on the north side. And then just also, I think this image or something along these lines with an overlay of some of those different alternatives that you were talking about, particularly like the ones that talk about moving deeper, which, you know, to me seem like definitely the most favorable. But it would be interesting to see the options that go longer and, you know, further offshore, to have those overlaid with the kind of like this, but this doesn't have the bathymetry. I want to see the bathymetry on it as well. And I want it as an overlay. Well, how about what I'd like is it would be helpful to see it as an overlay over the existing structure, which is why I like the other imagery with the bathymetry on it, because it's kind of more transparent and I can see more of what's going on versus this type of imagery that you have up currently. So it kind of would be helpful for me when I'm looking at these to be able to see an overlay of, you know, option or alternative B relative to existing and B3 or whatever relative to existing, because it allows me, it just gives me a better picture of what is the proposed versus existing, especially if it's got like dimensions. And I know I'm going way down the path of where I would need to go when I'm like evaluating something, but in my mind and for what I'm looking at and to be able to fully evaluate what I feel like would probably be, you know, a favorable or most favorable option as well. I think it would be helpful to be able to look at more of that to see exactly where those changes are occurring, so that I can, you know, when you say it's 18 feet wider, where exactly is that 18 feet going to occur? What part of the shoreline is that going to occur in? Or what part of the trestle, where will that occur? Or, you know, when you're showing, you know, how long the structure is, the stuff that you have currently is, you know, says 1,000 feet long or something like that, but it would be helpful to see where the additional 224 feet or whatever is at the waterward end of the structure, because it just kind of adds that layout that just kind of better shows the picture of what we're trying to evaluate and the benefit.
Yeah, that's great feedback, Lauren. I think definitely something that our team can provide, and actually something that came up as part of our executive advisory group meeting too. So we can look into doing that. And Ed, did you want to jump in to respond to or elaborate at all on the light filtering regarding Laura's first question?
Yeah, we're going to evaluate a couple of options, and the north side and the south side at the edges of the dock would be the most advantageous, at least from a structural perspective. But on the south side, we have that dedicated pedestrian walkway, and so any methodology that we apply for any light transmission, we need to make sure it is safe and ADA compliant for the pedestrian passengers using that walkway. We certainly wouldn't be able to put anything within traveled way of vehicles, but south side, your comment is noted, south side would be a lot more beneficial than north. And then with respect to your request with regarding dimensions and with imagery added to some of the diagrams, I just, in looking at what's on the screen right now, just to give you a perspective, the longer dock alternatives push the structure, the slip components of the structure out approximately 250 feet. There's some variability between the alternatives, but if you look at the contours here, I think the new slip throat for the lengthened dock alternatives would be at approximate -50 contour, just to give you an idea. So the end of the transfer span and the wing walls that you see on this existing, if you move them out to approximate -50 contour, that's where the boat would land.
Okay, that's super helpful. And then just going back to Penny's comment as well, just, obviously DFW would be requiring monitoring for any of the eelgrass, impacts to eelgrass. And even if there's, if the structure gets reconfigured in such a way that there's, improved light transmission in some areas, but new impacts in others, we would obviously be just requiring monitoring, long-term monitoring, to be looking at any of those sorts of changes. Like Marcia said, things that we've worked on up at Muckletail. And then also, with all this increased overwater coverage, what sort of mitigation would be considered for compensatory mitigation for the new structure? Would have to all be figured out in this process as well.
Yeah, thank you. I know that's something the team is starting to think about. Marcia, I don't know if you had anything to add there.
No, we understand that we would have to be mitigating for this amount of extra overwater coverage, and we'll have to begin putting our thinking caps on about how and where that can occur, based on where the selection process takes us.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Just checking in to see if any of our other advisory group members have any comments. David, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, good morning. Just turn a little bit on the land side discussion. Just glancing through some of the criteria, and one thing, it's probably there, but I'm missing it, is the various alternatives and its operational impact on the community along the road. So the queuing, as mentioned during the introduction of the alternatives, that one of the alternative will keep queuing on the streets significantly lower during non-peak periods, 85% time or something like that. There's a reference to one of them significantly reducing the queuing on Fauntleroy Way for most operational options. And so somewhere in there, we do need to see the impact, at least on the Kitsap side. This is something we're always important on on the east side, I'm sure it is also, is how the queuing impacts in the community are. Because, the more you can have, the more you can have less queuing on the street, the better for the community, and also for, different environmental criteria. You're talking about the stormwater, but also air pollution, idling, movements, safety as part of that. So just that the criteria does also has how each one of the alternatives allows for the, the impact on the queuing on Fauntleroy and the impacts to the community on that side.
Yeah, thank you, David. And Haley, if you want to go back over to the screening criteria, that's actually a comment that came up during the community advisory group as well. And sounds like maybe an opportunity to refine our criteria. But Dave, do you have any, would you like to respond there about how we're reflecting the queue length within the criteria and how we're considering that?
Yeah, David, we've heard that comment, and it's a good one. As Chris Arkle said earlier, there's always trade-offs, and taking vehicles off of Fauntleroy Way and getting them over the water certainly is a trade-off. But this is a screening criteria, and so that'll be an important thing that we take a look at, and we will factor that into the decision.
One of the things just I still unfit is that I like the good to go aspects. That has always had a good thing to try and speed the processing part of that. Now, I think the other one that was mentioned, they're using a different term for what I think is reservations on your operational side. Not a huge fan of reservation systems, especially in these type of environments. But good to go processing is a significant plus to help that queuing and increase the operationals.
Thanks, David. I know we're going to get into that more at one of our upcoming meetings, but Dave, do you want to just speak there to the difference between reservations and advanced ticketing, which is a part of something we're looking at for this project?
Yeah, so as part of the alternatives analysis, we will be looking at good to go and advanced ticketing as ways to improve efficiency and throughput at the toll booth. Advanced ticketing basically means you have a ticket prepaid and you just flash it and drive on, rather than processing, pulling out your wallet, writing a check, all that kind of stuff. We have not looked at a program where we would implement reservations. Those have initially, those always seem to have mixed emotions around them. I think in the San Juans, they've turned out to be very effective, and they have done a good job of reducing a lot of queuing and holding times. It's not something we're looking at as part of this project, but I certainly have heard people talk about that implementation of that approach around our system. But for now, we're just looking at how good to go can improve our operability and efficiency downstream from the toll booths. Thank you, David.
For that comment, and thanks, Dave. Any other thoughts? Again, you'll have some time to look at the memo in closer detail after this meeting, and feel free to provide your comments directly to the inbox, or WSF staff will be looking for your input.
I would like to mention that Adam Ospikoff mentioned that, as we move further on, we might look at some other habitat benefits or availability opportunities, to grow oysters, or just for water purification, things like that. He mentioned if he wants to come on and say more about it, I'd welcome that.
I'm not an expert in any of that area. I was just curious. I was thinking about different benefits that may be, or opportunities that we may have for purifying the water in that way. Just kind of a random thought.
We appreciate that.
Thank you.
We might get you all out of here early today. I know we just have a few remaining slides. If you want to bring those back up, Haley. Okay, and thank you, Hadley. I see we do have one member of the community in attendance today. Pass it over to you to facilitate any additional Q&A.
Don't see any comments or questions in the Q&A box, Laura, so I don't think we have any public comment today.
Thank you. So just a reminder, if you have feedback on the information we shared today or the alternative summary, if you could send that directly to the project inbox, I'll make sure that everyone from our project team sees that, and we also share all of the public comments that we get with our entire team, as well as with all 3 advisory groups. So we'll be sending out our latest public comment log as well after the meeting today. And I think that just brings us to our next step slide. So looking ahead, we have highlighted some of the topics that are coming up for the next TAG meeting as we continue on with the PAL study. We mentioned the traffic analysis. That's something that the team is working on, and we'll be looking forward to discussing with you all, as well as the environmental analysis, construction phasing and service levels, and as well as other project elements that we've touched on today, like the good to go and advanced ticketing study, intersection improvements, and overhead passenger loading. And then just in terms of next steps, we are looking towards scheduling our next TAG meeting in early 2024 and getting into a more regular cadence of meeting with this group, as well as our other advisory groups. We'll also hold community meetings before applying the level 3 screening criteria, and then finally selecting the preferred alternative and completing our Pell report. With that, any final comments or anything to add from the ferries team?
Oh, nothing other than thank you so much for spending an hour with us and all the feedback.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you for your feedback.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.